Skateboard Canada.
You got one on the ramp right there.
Hi, I'm Oliver.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Roger from Skateboard Canada. Thank you for joining me. We're back with another episode and another amazing guest. Thanks very much. You know this guy in the background here? Bill Weiss, Toronto, LA. He's done a lot for Canadian skateboarding, and he was kind enough to take some time to talk to us today. Bill, what you got? Sick footage. Thanks for sending those clips over. I know you're a deep down raw skater. Thanks for verifying that with everybody. That's really cool. How's it going? Where are you at? You're in LA, Bill?
I'm in Westminster, California, which is about 30 minutes south of LA, right next to Huntington Beach.
Okay, so you're right in the Mecca. You're in the thick of it. How's that going in California? We're getting some winter weather coming in. What's the weather like down in California, Bill?
Well, it's 90 degrees today, so 30 plus for you guys. Super nice, zero clouds, typical. A little redundant, but no complaints. I obviously have spent enough time in Canada to know the seasons, so yeah, it's good.
Bill, you're an older skater like myself. Are you an 80s skater? Is that kind of when you got going in skateboarding, when you found a skateboard?
Yeah, 1985.
Okay, so we're in the same age category here. You're from out east. You're from Toronto. Tell me about that. When did you get the first skateboard? And are you from Toronto?
Yeah, I'm from down. I grew up basically Broadview and Dundas, so just east of downtown, on the other side of the Don River. Started skating in '85. Had taken a tennis trip to Florida with a friend. His parents bought him a skateboard. He didn't really touch it. I was like fascinated with it, so constantly sort of tooling around with it there. Then when we got back, he lived in a different part of the city, so I would go by his house and see if he wanted to ride around on the board. And then he had basically stopped skating as soon as he got home. So I basically just kept bothering my mother for like months. Man, over 6 months just to get a board. She didn't really have money for it. So finally, she got me a pink Powell Ripper, and that was my first skateboard. I was super pumped.
And Toronto, like how many was the scene hot back then? I mean, in my scene,
I had to.
Yeah, was it?
I mean,
What'd you find out?
Discover it. I had to discover it myself. Once I had the board, I literally had no idea. Did other people skate in Toronto? Where did other people skate? So I would rummage around in hopes. And I had gone to whatever type of shops were around back then. A lot of it was like BMX stores that had skateboards and stuff like that. Somehow I ended up at the Duke of Connaught, which was these old banks off like Coxwell and Queen at this school, really sort of for carving at best. And that's where I first got a glimpse of like skateboarding for what it was. It's kind of like a punk scene. A lot of the Toronto guys that were clearly running the scene back then, people like Dave Buchanan from Hammer Skateboards, Steve Katsopoulos, Eugene Yu, Boris Lico. They definitely had a scene going, and quickly I pestered those guys and just sort of followed them around, which of course led to them having the cow ramp, which was a couple hours outside of the city, which is a whole nother story.
Now, Bill, I got your checkout here from Transworld. You're 15 and you're already going down to the south. when
Yeah.
did you clue in like the scene was bigger, and who opened your eyes to this? Like go to California, get out of town, kind of thing.
Well, that two parts to it. Let's say I started in '85. Obviously, vert was my mainstay, even though we skated everything back then. So once I got to skate ramps, there was a couple indoor places. Those places were usually short lived due to insurance and stuff like that. So there was also the cow ramp in the country, which was the guys I had mentioned before, and that was kind of a privilege to be able to go there. So we had that spot. Through the course of that time, we were very fortunate that Tom Boyle had moved to Toronto in 1986, the end of '86, and up until that point, obviously, my mentors and people I looked up to were the names mentioned. And then, of course, people like Brent Jordan and stuff like that, who were all ripping. And then Tom moved to Toronto because his father worked for U of T as a philosopher. And like all of a sudden, there's this guy who's not sponsored, who, in my eyes, was better than most of the pros I was looking up to. And he really changed the course of skateboarding in Toronto uh, just by being humble, but such a ripper. So Tom, quickly was making a name for himself, and he started going down the road of the NSA amateur series, which were typically down in the States. New York to Florida, Chicago to Houston, Seattle to San Diego were kind of the divisions. And Tom in 1988 made it all the way to the AM finals. So when he got back from that trip, because there was minimal anything at best, we were just listening to his words, and I was like, dude, how'd it go? And he was like, oh, I quit. And I'm like, quit? What do you mean? You just got fourth, I think, at the AM finals. And he's like, yeah, but there's this little kid named Danny Way there, and he's 4 feet tall. He goes higher than Hosoi, and he's better than Tony Hawk at tricks. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, where is he? And he was like, he's in San Diego. So clearly at that point, me and Tom thought it was a perfectly good idea to get on the bus from Toronto to San Diego, which took 5 days. I had $30, and that was my first trip out there to go see this firsthand.
Insane.
Yeah. And he was right. I knew he was correct.
I was going to ask you about that because at some point, sponsors and NSA and contests and that kind of starts entering your thought process. In your checkout, you're skating for Gullwing and Dogtown. A couple years later, here you are. Someone opens up Thrasher. There's Bill Weiss, Dogtown ad, Naked McTwist. You knew how to set a name for yourself early on, didn't you, Bill?
Well, I'd never been offered an ad in a magazine, so the point of that whole thing was kind of like people made such a big deal of 540s at the time, and for whatever reason they weren't that big of a deal to me. So I thought, I just do it nude because who cares? Like I was kind of over that trick, and inevitably it turned into a whole nother thing, right? It kind of defined a lot of like perception, but it was really kind of just a joke that in retrospect, because Vert died, about 2 years after that, uh, it definitely carried me for a decade past because that was literally all people wanted to see, during the street '90s, where most vert skaters had either gone back to college, gotten a job, whatever. It carried me through a very strange change in skateboarding.
You had to take that and realize that, and I was going to ask you about that too, Bill. You were one of the first guys that started filming and started to kind of have the video camera around, capturing the raw footage, the stuff that people really wanted to see. Was there a point when you realized you had to diversify a little bit?
That kind of came after, one of the things, it's actually ironic that it ended up going down that way. But, in my upbringing, nobody wanted to film. That's why there wasn't very much footage from '85 to whatever. It was like, everyone just wanted to skate. No one really cared about filming. The video stuff came along in 1999. I was still skating for a living or whatever that means. And I would go to the Van skate park in Orange here, and I would bring my vert board and my street board, and I would go there and I'd skate for 3-4 hours a day. And I remember sitting there one day while I was on the street course doing like mute 180s over the pyramid or the tranny to pyramid. It was horrible. And I was like, am I practicing? Like, what am I doing? So I threw all my stuff in the combi pool, and some kid was like, hey, your stuff. And I was like, that is your stuff. And I just like retired myself on the spot because I just was over it. And I remember leaving. I felt so liberated and just so like happy to not be under whatever microscope, or however people define skateboarding. And then shortly after that, I was like, dude, now what? Like, what the fuck? I'm completely uneducated. I'm, party monster at that point. And I had always had a couple ideas, but up until that point, skateboarding was never like a career choice for me. It was like, I ride for this company, make sure I get paid. These are the guys that I want to have on my team. So, sort of a support system, but I never thought of it as a business. Um, so, one of the things I was always interested in doing was kind of making a video company, video magazine, because at the time, 401 had definitely been the mainstay of skateboarding video wise, but I felt like they just kept doing the same thing. They had used everyone's footage in a million different ways, and no one was really benefiting from it but them. Um, so I had proposed this idea, and again, I'd never used a computer, never had my own video camera, had no idea how to do anything. And I had proposed this to Mike Crum and Rune Glifberg and a friend of ours, Donnie, and was like, I think we should do this. And against all better judgment, those guys lent me about 100 grand US and just believed in the idea. And from that point forward, what automatically changed was no longer was I taking someone's money. I was using my friend's money, and my only thought process then was I have to pay them back. I have to make this video. So that's how that started.
Very successful. You were kind enough to make some sick videos with your guys and stuff, and I still got copies of those. It's super awesome. But it kind of launched a whole different path for you too, right? Now, what are you working now?
Absolutely.
You're with Dwindle Distribution. Is that your 9 to 5, Bill?
Yeah. So I've been with Dwindle now 18 years. That all came about when we had done the digital skateboarding video. At one point, a couple years in, Dwindle wanted to acquire digital and bring it into their distribution. In doing so, that automatically, first things first, I got to pay my friends back, which I was super happy about. And secondly, they were cut out of the picture than I was to sort of run that for them. Within months of that happening, the market crashed. The first thing to go was digital. And I was like, well, that was quick, but they got paid back, fair enough. And it was then when the active president, Rob Valerio, had asked me if I'd be interested in running Blind. And I was like, are you crazy? Like, I did not see the fit whatsoever. And he was like, no, you could do this for sure. So, he saw something else and gave me an opportunity. So I took that on. And, over the course of many years, doing Blind, like when I inherited it, I felt like I was taking on a dead brand. They had really like milked the graphic thing and kind of got very close to the World Industries effect. And I was always like, Blind had such a rich history and quality skateboarding that's kind of what my narrative was going to be moving forward. And then, years and years and years of trying to right the ship, it seems like we've found a good space over those years. Um, and, a couple years back, I had also always wanted to do a brand that was more tranny oriented. And I had been adamant about doing this for many years, and finally got the green light to do Madness, which is another one of the things I'm doing now for them.
Yeah, and just as one skater to another, and even I grew up skating a lot of vert and transition, Bill. in a way, you're kind of saving. I don't want to go over my limits here or anything, but you're doing a real good thing for transition skateboarders, and you're, a guy like Clay, one of your guys there, and Alex. Those guys have found a home at a company that's kind of willing to let them be who they are, right? So that's really cool because you're pushing that genre of skating too. I mean, those guys are killing
Sure.
it, but they need a home, right? So you've given them a home, and I think that's like skateboarding kind of says thank you. Those guys need a home. You gave them a home.
Yeah, I feel like it was a couple things. A lot of it was timing. The idea had always been rattling around in my head, um, about doing something that was more inspired by my upbringing, that being, shapes and I can always name off the top of my head my 5, 8 favorite boards I ever had growing up, why I liked them, this, that, whatever. So it was a complicated thing of trying to figure, A, making a completely different product element from what Dwindle does, right? B, I was fascinated with fit and finish and maxing, a wood shop because most people, most brands make a $49 skateboard US retail. And I was like, well, what about an $80 skateboard where you really put all this energy into the woodworking and the inlays and the textures and the graphics and at first no one really saw that, but I was like, 95% of the market is already the $49 skateboard, right? So, with that being said, during this time, I had already had an idea of riders, and Clay Craner had caught my attention years ago. And I remember Mike Frazier was at a Vert Attack in Sweden, and he had been texting me all night because of the time difference, clips of Clay hitting the roof and doing all this crazy shit padless. And I was asking Mike, I was like, who is that? He's like, dude, I don't even know. And I'm like, get his phone number. And he's like, for what? And I'm like, I don't know, just get it. And so I had his number for a while before I had even sort of put all this together. But he was definitely part of that nucleus of like centering as far as how I saw the team. And then, someone like Alex Perlson to me was a natural fit in the sense that he's just one of those guys that whenever he's skating, you stop and watch. And I just kind of went from there. But it came together over kind of a lot of years. And it was designed and people can say vert or whatever. But when this was happening, I couldn't count 3 vert ramps on my hand. All these guys just skated whatever transition was available. And typically that was a lot of cement.
It's amazing skating. I mean, you've done it. I've done it. It needs to be brought to the surface and always kind of people be reminded of how rad it actually is, right? And those guys are doing a great job with your help there. Now, kind of change gears a little bit. Dwindle looks after a lot of Canadians, Bill. Is this just a coincidence, or come on? I could name like so many here, and even Mickey Papa in the Olympics. How proud are you of these guys, and is that kind of just something that you keep in the back of your head? Look after your fellow Canadians.
I mean, it kind of goes without saying that, obviously I'm always looking for great Canadian skateboarders, and there's certainly no lack of that. I've always had a pretty good system of, boots on the ground as far as being aware of, new guys or what's happening from, all different provinces. So I've been lucky in that and those relationships. People always will touch base with me, way ahead of the curve, maybe when a kid's ready to go. The one thing I like to do is if I'm going to put my time into someone, I don't need to be sold on it. It doesn't have to mean they've already accomplished certain things. I can usually see it. So it's like I like to just be proactive and start directly with them right away and try and do whatever I can to help them put them in front of the right people or make sure they're getting the spotlight on them. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, you could say it's a coincidence, but at the same time, I've spent tons of years in Canada and, again, there's just so much raw talent there. There's so much diversity that, I'm always going to try and exploit that to the rest of the world.
Yeah, you're definitely one of the guys we consider a scout. Talk to me about TJ Rogers. He's someone you kind of
Yep.
picked on early, isn't it? Can you tell me about him?
Yep. TJ, yeah, I mean, he was definitely one of those situations. I believe it was actually Paul Macknow had been doing some stuff with the distribution back in the day. I don't know if they had a dwindle Canadian side or whatever, but Paul had mentioned he had been giving boards to this guy, and he just sent me some footage, and right away I saw the talent, and again sort of just went from, instead of just kind of going through the feed of through Paul then to TJ, I just got in touch with TJ, built a reputation of us communicating. And then because he was so ambitious, just made a note to make sure that we got him out this way, or made sure to connect when he was out this way. And from the get go, he's a hardworking dude, and we just sort of went straight to it right away. And obviously, TJ's been pounding hard for years. And, even though many have been very aware of just how raw he is, I think this last year he's really getting his due from the world.
Bill, how closely did you watch the Olympics this year? Were you one of the guys? Did you go over there and watch it, or were you watching it pretty closely, or what did you think of that?
I had quite a few guys in it, so obviously I was very involved with watching it. I didn't go over just because of the COVID restrictions. It was very limited, and at the same rate, going across the ocean to sit in a hotel room wasn't ideal. And I know that the guys had enough on their plates to focus on. So we had Mickey for Canada, we had Sora Shirai for blind from Japan, and then Jake Alardi from Florida for blind as well. So three guys that were in street.
Strong representation over there. Now,
Yeah.
where do you see skating going? Are we going to continue down that? Is it going to split? Are we going to have the hardcore thrasher guys? You still have all these what you call tribes. I kind of take that from your love letters interview you did with Grosso. Skating is going to keep growing and growing and growing, and just it's a sport like volleyball and soccer. Where are we going, Bill?
Well, I don't think it will ever change. I mean, the only difference now is there's just more lanes, right? So if you're the punker guy that hates the Olympics for whatever reason, you're always going to be the punker guy drinking a beer complaining about it. It doesn't matter, right? Or if you're an Olympic person and you have an aspiration there, that lane's open to you as well. Regardless, the exposure is only going to help skateboarding, and that means that more parks of high levels are going to be built for the punker guy to enjoy and complain about whatever. But at the end of the day, they get a great bowl, or you see what they're building now. So it kind of works for everyone, regardless of what it's viewed as. It will only matter to the people that are in these lanes, right? People can have their cake and eat it too. If they want to be this, they can be that. If they want to be that, they can be this too. And I think that, as far as skateboarding being a sport, I still feel we're a long ways from that, because skateboarding's quite cliquey. Whereas if I don't consider skateboarding a sport based off financial income that skaters make. But if you're in the NBA and you score 20, 10, and 10, no matter who you are, who thinks you're cool or whatever, you're going to get paid on those numbers, period. Right? Whereas in skateboarding, you can be the best in the world, and because a bunch of dickheads don't like you, you might not ever get a clear shot. Right? So we got a long way to go there. I've always said it, skateboarders, to me, they act like they have thick skin, but they're so sensitive, and they're harsher on their own people than the jocks that used to mess with me when I went to school. So it's quite ironic that, skateboarders still have that, they worry too much about other people's opinions and are guided on thinking who's cool and who's not, when at the end of the day, good skateboarding is good skateboarding. You should enjoy it for what it is.
I'm going to add to that, Bill. One of the guys you sponsor, Cody McIntyre, came up to Canada a couple years ago and did a little demo, did a demo in Medicine Hat, and he blew us away. And I've been kind of watching him on the Instagram and everything, but there's an example of a guy that is just beyond talent, and he's he doesn't make a lot of noise, doesn't get a lot of press, but amazing skateboarder. How do you deal with these guys? Like the guy is so amazing.
Well, I mean, yeah, he's definitely. I put him in the Tom Penny, Luan,
Yeah,
Cody Mack, like just people that really have control over their skateboard uh, in ways that very few do. Um, there's different ways to look at it. If people wanted to focus on Cody's toothpick when he likes skating with that in his mouth, more than the fact that he catches his tricks better than almost anyone ever has, I guess that's their prerogative. But at the end of the day, the backstory to simple things like that are, yeah, I even told him the toothpick's a little much, but it was his way of quitting smoking. And did he run with it hard? Sure, so be it, right? But I've always been able to very well look past those type of things and just see skating for what it is. But again, I get it. You're never going to change that sort of mentality that insecure people have, and it's much easier to talk shit than appreciate things. And that laundry list goes on in skateboarding for the end of time. That debate is never going to be corrected. But perfect example is all those people that may have had something to say about Cody's outfit or his big T-shirt or his toothpick or this or that, whatever. Had they been there at a demo or a session skating with him, they'd have nothing but admiration and a high five for him, I'm sure.
absolutely, absolutely. We saw,
You
yeah.
know, it's a work of art when you see him skate. It's unbelievable how consistent and talented and flawless his abilities are. And he's been pounding the pavement for a long time too, working for his spot. And I really appreciate those type of skaters. And I think now that you put it that way, I often think that Blind, or my version of Blind, was always built on those type of misfits that some might have something to say about. But I'm like, do you even know these people? So I've always enjoyed working with kids like that and putting them in front of everyone.
Bill, how good was Tom Penny back in the 90s? You were right there front and center. How good was Tom Penny? Just, you were right there. You can tell me. Tell
He
everybody.
was he was uh, he was so good that it was almost like a joke. It was, the running joke back in the day, because most all sessions started and ended at Rob Deerdick's house in Pacific Beach, where we all were. Was we would go out and skate some days, and some days we wouldn't even have the car. And I would get back, and I would seriously have to contemplate: did he fall at all today? Did he miss a trick? And many times I'm almost 100% certain he did not. It was crazy.
Gives me goosebumps. So I was only able to witness from the video and the media angle, but you were
he
there.
he did not care about it at all. He was the total opposite of like someone that flaunted anything. It was like if he saw something and he liked it, he just did whatever he wanted to do right away and didn't even think about what just happened.
Now,
It
how did
was
you,
really second nature.
Bill, how did you find yourself in the middle of all of this? I mean, you hang with the heavy dudes. From what I know, I don't know you
Well,
personally, but you're right in the middle of it all. Like, good job.
well, I think a lot of it, like I said, was when I had just worked my way up to whatever deserving to turn pro was, and a lot of that back in the day had to do with uh, the NSAM series, and the rule of thumb was, if you make it to the AM finals and you're in the top 10, that was kind of a blessing, if you won without question. But typically, if you look at the roadmap, anyone that was typically in the top 10 then went on to turn pro, entering pro contests. Um, in mine, I won the first one at the regional. I got, or no, the qualifier I won. Second one, I got second or third, and the finals, I think I should have done better. It was a long night in Reno. It was, I don't know if I even slept, but I ended up getting ninth. And at the time, I had learned 720s, and I guess at the time that was kind of another big thing for an amateur. And Danny Wayhit was there, and I was about to turn pro for Dogtown, and he was like, "Dude, you should ride for H Street." And of course, uh, he's like, "You got to quit Dogtown right now," and I did so, and so be it. And then through the course of that, I was down in San Diego, and then when Vert died, what seemed like overnight, it went from, designing your shape, your board, you're going to have a board now, or this is when it's coming out, to they wouldn't even pick up the phone, and talk to me or us back then. You went from being their main prospect am to just use toilet paper. And it was super weird, and it was what it was like everyone disappeared. Everyone, Bucky, all the way from people like Tony Hawk, like everyone got hit by the same thing. You were just rejected by our own industry. Verts whack, see you later. And then the street movement came in. I remember everyone was gone. All the parks disappeared. And I was like, really, like, so do I not skate? Like, it was super weird to me, and I was like, whatever. I had skated enough street. By no means was it my forte, but I was in SD. I think I was staying with Sal Barbier at the time, and because he was also a teammate of mine on H Street. And this was when Plan B was starting, and clearly they didn't bring me along for that ride. Probably a good choice on their part. But so I was just there. And I remember I was at the beach one day and I saw Rob Dyrdek like pull up in a car with John Drake. And I was like, what are you doing? I'd met him at some of the AMP contests. He's like, we're just going to give it a whirl. Like, come out here. And he had a 1-bedroom studio that they were renting. Quickly started hanging out with those guys, literally sleeping on the floor there. And we just sort of hit it off. And, it was right in the blossom of the street movement. So as these things were happening, Rob was on this clear trajectory. So was John Drake, about being, really big movement changers in street skating at the time, coming from Ohio to put the flag down for the workshop. And for me, I was just a useless commodity to our industry, sort of just, I had a place to stay. That was enough for me to get by. And then through the course of that, Pacific Drive, which was the main shop in Pacific Beach in California, was very much kind of like the hub of where everyone met in the morning. If that was, Dyrdek, or if it was Jamie Thomas, or if it was Danny, or whoever was Sal Barbier, Donger, everyone was there. The sessions kind of went from there. Me being in the situation I started, they had wanted to do some earlier board companies like Change and Premiere is some stuff I did. And during that time, it always felt like random to me, but in retrospect, it was no different than the independent board movement that happens now and is very celebrated. But at that time, you're coming from Powell, Santa Cruz Vision, 8th Street, Blind World, like, whereas now having a cool underground company is almost like cooler than riding for a big company. So it's just hard to accept then. But it also created was a space for all these skaters, that I was kind of doing it without even noting, but I was putting, really good amateurs in situations. And I was also gathering pros that, because of the fall of the industry, now had another home. Again, I never looked at it as like a business for myself, but it was a way to have income, a way to have a team, and a way to do stuff at a time when the industry was going through big changes. So, like an easy example for that was, I was on the East Coast, skated with Lenny Kirk, automatically kind of bonded with him, brought him out here. And then every time, I would do this, everyone would kind of pay attention, but knowing there was only so long I could keep someone of that talent involved with what I was doing. So that joke as well was, how long till they ride for the workshop? And then, there was Lenny, there was Corey Shepard, there were so many different kids that were kind of in that space, but then I knew for sure that they were going to graduate onto something better.
Oh, Bill.
So yeah, to your point, it was just the fact of being stubborn. Like, I didn't not want to skate. As I said, I just sort of dealt with the situations at hand. I was surrounded by literally the best street skaters. If it was Kareem, Duffy, Dyrdek, Lenny, John Drake, Kelly Bird, Josh Kalis, like that was our posse. So I would try and do what I could. I'd get a photo here and there, but I was also reprimanding and having these young AMs that I was bringing into perspective. And all those guys were psyched. They knew I was a vert skater that predominantly whatever. But at that time, if there was a session, I was going to try and jump in, and that helped me cover bases for quite a long time. Whereas, like I said, most vert guys probably never skated street or weren't familiar with that thing. But I grew up in downtown Toronto. I grew up skating with some of the best street skaters from Canada, so it's like I kind of got it, but I clearly understood that that wasn't my thing. I used to actually have to lie to my other sponsors that were giving me stuff at the time. They're like, "You don't skate vert anymore, do you?" And I'm like, "Oh no!" Like, well, I'm in pads on Deerdick's cell phone or something at the time, like, you know. But then shit changed, right? Plan B got a ram. Colin and Danny were pushing the narrative. Tom Penny was skating tranny as well. Like, it all started to come full circle, and ironically, being able to skate everything became the norm, whereas, you know, they just exiled it for a while. And then, of course, the X Games started. Tony got to re-ride that whole thing. I had actually had a company. This is another crazy story. When I was doing Change, it was me, Lance Conklin, Bo Turner, Corey Shepard, Lenny Kirk, and I called Bucky Lasek because I hadn't seen him in a while. And I was like, "Hey, are you still skating?" And he was like, "Yeah, kind of, like once a month. I go to this ramp in PA." And I was like, "Cheap skates." And I was like, "Cool." And I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I work at UPS." And I was like, "Would you consider riding for my company and coming out here and helping drive it?" And he's like, "Dude, I got a good job, like, And I was like, "I get it." And I was like, "What if I could pay you 250 more than you make at UPS?" And he was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." So Bucky comes out. As soon as he gets out here, the guy that owned the company that I was doing got rid of me, kept Bucky. And then Bucky landed right at the beginning of the X Games. And then his career, of course, him being Bucky, just boom, right? So just weird little things that happened during that time.
Now, Bill, I was going to talk about this with you. X Games, that mid 90s. You're sitting in the stands at Staples Center. Jake Brown goes down the ramp, just about kills himself. What's going through your mind? Take us back to that moment, Bill?
That was crazy in a couple things. One, he rode for me at the time, and we're good friends. So he had told me his game plan for the contest. He made the run he wanted to do. So I was like, he's going to do pretty good. And I was sitting there, and as he was going back towards the elevator, he looked at me and he did this little finger motion, and everyone was like, "Oh, what's that mean?" I was like, "I think he's going to try 720, but he hasn't done it yet. I don't know if it's going to work." So I saw him go down, and he made it, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like, I was like, "Holy shit, he did it!" And I saw him in the back seat, and I was like, "Oh shit!" And I could tell when he was going down the ramp, like it was bad because he was leaning so far back trying to get his balance. And of course, if you skate tranny, when you're going up a wall and you're leaning back, it's a bad situation. So as soon as I saw him go off the lip and how far away, I just started going towards the ramp. I didn't see the actual slam. I just heard it. And when I got there, he was just lying there, and it was dead silent. I thought, like, dude, he might have died, you know? Um, and it was just super crazy. I went over there. Ellis was with them. And finally, like, he moved, and he was just like, "Help me up, help me up." And we're like, and he's like, "I need to get up. I want to stand up." So we were like, "Okay," got him up. Place goes ape shit. I went outside with him. I actually have a crazy photo of him. He's sitting on a gurney with this like protruding bruise coming through his chest with no shirt on. And he's like, "Give me a smoke." So he's sitting there having a smoke. And it was just a crazy thing. And then, of course, he went into the ICU. He was there for a few days because I was basically managing or working with him at the time, being his team manager. I started getting all these calls from the hospital, and they were like, "Hey, we need some help. There's paparazzi here." And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, there's all these, media news people wanting to like get an interview with them, and we need some help." Like, so I was like, "Really?" So I go there, and it's just a shit show. And what I didn't realize is the whole world had seen this guy fall live on television, and everyone wanted to know what happened. So much so that I started getting the Today Show, the Tonight Show, Letterman, Larry King. And then the aftermath of all this was Jake going on this crazy PR ride telling the story. Again, I didn't put the two and two together at the time, but people witnessed something crazy and they wanted to learn more about this person. And, that definitely changed the course of Jake's trajectory in a way, in a good and bad way at the same time, because people were so avid about, uh, just wanting to know what. Whoa, we got my neighbor's dog just broke into my house. Oh, uh, so yeah, it was crazy. It was a big change in skateboarding also in that moment because it got so much attention from just regular people, right? Um, and it was just crazy, and then of course when you see the playbacks, you see the footage, Jake, you can tell that he literally made a decision last minute to kind of let his body go limp, versus taking it bruntly, and it probably saved his life, you know
What I can't get over too is that he did a 720 ollie before he hit the quarter pipe. The 720
well,
ollie. Just was it a 720 grab or a 720 ollie?
it was 720 grab was at the X Games.
Okay.
720 ollie was a few years later in Brazil, which to this day might be the craziest thing ever done over the gap. It makes literally no sense.
That's what I'm getting at, Bill. Like you're dealing with some
And
truly yeah, insane humans here.
I was actually folding laundry watching that X Games, and Jake had tried this trick so many tries, and I was like, Jake, just get a rundown, dude. It's all good. And I looked, and he did it, and I screamed, and my kids were like, "Oh, what happened?" And I'm like, "Dude, who else but Jake?" Like, it just seemed unbelievable, which it was. But of course, if there's someone that's gonna get the impossible done, it's Jake Brown.
Yeah, yeah. Super cool. Bill, you don't hide the fact that you're a Toronto Raptors fan. What's the story with that? You've been a basketball fan your whole life, or are you just keeping the Toronto spirit alive down in LA?
I wasn't. I didn't play any sports. I never cared about sports growing up. I was purely focused on skateboarding. When Toronto had, or when they put an expansion team in Toronto, my mother, who worked at Sick Kids Hospital, uh, was a basketball fan, B played basketball, and C is from Almont, where the guy who invented basketball is actually from. So she was super into it, and the generous people that provide tickets for the kids that are in Sick Kids Hospital, that there's a lot of great groups that get tickets for hockey games, basketball, baseball. um, she would have the ability to have extra tickets sometimes, but if she was with the kids from her ward when I went, I could go, but I couldn't acknowledge her at all because that's just not how the tickets work. So I quickly just enjoyed watching basketball. And then a lot of the time I was out here and I would just focus on whatever glimpses of Toronto I could get from Sports Center. And then I just started watching basketball and enjoying it, similar to skateboarding, how all the players have their own tricks, and just went from there. And then, obviously living in Lakerland, which was just permanent success of great basketball years here, and me being a Raptors fan, which was many years of just shit. But I just couldn't give up on them, and I saw management make horrible decisions. Went through the Stoudemire years, the Vince Carter years, the Chris Bosh years, and after a certain, I think it was 7, 8 years ago, I started to see some stability in them, and I was like, man, they're starting to get a good track. And then of course, a couple hard years of playoff losses, and then this Kawhi trade, and I was like, man, they have a real opportunity here. Obviously, it seemed like a big shot in the dark, but I'm like, they have the talent. And I was, I don't know if I've ever been more excited by myself watching that winning game here, than that as far as sports. But yeah, I've always, it's easy to be someone in LA and root for an LA team that had this perma success. And that's typically what I saw with most out of towners here, where it's like, I like Toronto's underdog story. I like being able to watch management make just bad decisions, and learn a lot about that process and pay attention to players. So much so when DeRozan would be, or when he played for the Raptors, I'd be at Lakers games and people would just like be cursing the guy out. And I'm like, you realize he's from Compton, right? And they didn't even know that. And it's just bizarre to me. But anyways, so yeah, love him to this day. I was actually just in town a week ago or 2 weeks ago for a brief minute. Got to see a preseason game, and yeah, just perma fan. So always down.
Ah, that's cool. That's cool. Bill, we've had a good chat here. I'm really happy that you took the time. I think I'm going to wind her down here. I was saying 15, 20 minutes. You took us on a longer ride, and I'm really thankful that you did. All the best to you. Thanks again for coming on Skateboard Canada. I know the country appreciates it, and everyone that's going to see this is going to learn a lot about skateboarding. So all the best to you, Bill. Thanks again.
Right on, guys. Take care.
Awesome. You too, Bill.
Cheers.
Well, there you go, folks. Another great interview. Bill Weiss, living legend, Toronto, Ontario. We're going to wrap it up. Back with some more awesome stuff next time. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next time from Skateboard Canada.
Skateboard Canada.